Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Professor Zeblon Zenzele Vilakazi has big plans for Wits University during his tenure as vice-chancellor. But he cautions that South Africa needs to strengthen other streams of post-school education besides universities. Vilakazi was formally installed as Wits' 16th vice-chancellor and principal. He was appointed in January and takes over from Professor Adam Habib. The Katlehong-born nuclear physicist joined the institution in 2014 as deputy vice-chancellor for research and postgraduate affairs, and in April was appointed vice-principal. His baptism of fire into his new role began almost immediately when Wits had to postpone its official inauguration as the university's new head at the height of student protests in early March. Professor Vilakazi joins me now in studio. Very good afternoon to Professor. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, congratulations first of all on your new role as the Vice-Chancellor of Wits University. How do you feel having taken up this role currently?
Thank you. I'll say first before I start that a baptism of fire is a bit of an extreme word. You know, these are challenges every leader has to contend with. So I wouldn't call it a baptism of fire at all.
Well, we'll come to those challenges and how you're going to deal with them. But first of all, your reaction to being the first black vice-chancellor of this university.
Actually, I'm not the first black vice-chancellor. I'm the third because I'm the second African vice-chancellor, if you use the word. Because Professor Nonqa was the vice-chancellor from 2003 to 2012.
And just looking at your history, Professor, I mean, you could have stayed in Geneva. You had an option to stay there. The role that you were occupying there seemed rather, comfortable. It was, it was also a good-paying job. Give us a bit of your background, and what strengths you're bringing in with you that make you the best candidate for this position currently.
Well, I don't think I could have, I was still a young, what you call a postdoc, an intern rather, in Geneva at this laboratory. So there were plenty of opportunities at the time that could avail themselves, especially in banking in the area of quants. So yes, I could have actually opted to go to the banks and probably not come back to South Africa, at least not that soon.
Well, what inspired you to return then to South Africa?
Around 1994, I mean, the country was changing and I just turned 25 and I felt that I should be part of this big project. And I think the key thing that we miss as South Africans, in particular many black South Africans, is strong science and mathematics education. And the few of us who had those skills that we had acquired from some of the top laboratories abroad should have been almost treasonous, if I can say so, just to turn my back on my country when it needed me the most at the time.
Before we get to the strength or the need for science and technology, being improved in the universities, how would you say you've been settling into the role, especially considering that when you joined the university, it was almost at the height of the student protests at the beginning of the year?
Absolutely. I mean, again, student protests are part of the broader set of activities that take place at university. And I think if you can just expand the lens a bit wider, you find that there's been a lot of other activities that are taking place and were taking place at the time. So I was kept busy with student protests, among other things that I had to contend with.
What are those other challenges that you were contending with that do make up
yes,
the
of
job?
course, COVID is one of them. That is topmost in all our minds. It influences the way we interact and live, and we have to also learn to get into these online learning platforms that present technological challenges because we started the academic year in an unusual way, in a sense that we never had, face-to-face teaching. So we had to really get students to learn to get onto these online platforms by providing them with devices and data as well.
And how would you say that you plan to deal with plans like transformation then in the higher education space in general and also in Wits in particular? Well,
I'm not at all the first person to start the transformation journey. And I can say that transformation is not just one single act. It's a process. This transformation of this university started, decades ago. So we just go to target, among others. I mean, if you look at when I went to Wits in the early 1990s, it was a majority white institution. And I think let's not ignore the fact that now, Wits demographically is broadly representative of the country. And that is something to be proud of as South Africans. And we've continued doing much better than we've done during the height of apartheid. So we've shown that we can transform, at the same time ensure that we rise in the academic rankings of various rankings that they have. So I don't see transformation as just separate from academic and intellectual excellence. And I think that is something that I want to be clear about. So therefore, transformation is just part of the journey that you have to go, among others. And it's going to be central, of course, in driving the research agenda, both in terms of how we transform our curriculum to deal with the future of work and the future of robotics, also deal with what kind of curriculum do we have in our context that speaks to us and the world.
And just on that issue of the curriculum currently, you did mention earlier on that there's an importance that should be placed on science, on technology, and you've just mentioned robotics. How soon then will the syllabus be expected to change to shift towards that inclusion of, relevant skills for the fourth industrial revolution?
We have started that process. In actual fact, online learning was something that we thought was going to happen in the future, and COVID, of course, put that future right in front of our doorsteps. So we had to pivot quite fast. But also, the curriculum that we need to, look into has to factor in what I'd call, you must become more multidisciplinary. That you cannot train a mathematician like you used to do in the past. Even an art student must understand mathematics. A scientist must also have a creative understanding, because when robots take over, right, we are a creative people. So therefore, people think of this future as a future based on science and technology. It will need humanities. It will need our creative abilities to learn to work with this new platform. So by reforming the curriculum doesn't mean that you start to add anything new. You just rethink the way you've taught and learned and conducted your university administration and business in the past.
And just speaking about the pandemic, would you say that you're happy with how the school pivoted? You mentioned that there had to be a very quick pivot when the pandemic hit. And would you also say that perhaps that shift to a more online interface in terms of learning is an advantage to the university, especially when it comes to student protests, that protests won't disrupt the academic year as much as they used to before online learning became so prevalent?
Actually, I don't believe that you can have a university without one form or the other of protest over many other issues. And I think the idea of having 18 to 22-year-olds with opinions of how they think they can change the world is very healthy. So I don't see us as trying to, using platforms like this to suppress protests, because there can be protests about other things, right? It is the nature of the protest that one has to be, worried about. But I think that we are not out to quell protests. We are out to ensure that protest takes place within certain boundaries. So I don't want to have a discussion around protests.
No, of course, I'm not talking about quelling them. I'm talking about the advantage to the university that the online education platform actually brings, that you are able to continue with the syllabus. Unlike previously when protests could actually shut down the university's work, would you say online learning is an advantage to the university in that sense?
Even previously, when we had protests, I mean, you remember in 2015-16 with the fees must fall, that we're able to complete the academic year. So protests has never, in this university, stopped us from writing our exams, completing the academic year, graduating the next generation of, people that are going to be, working. So I think we've never had protests actually stopping our academic program to its totality.
And then in terms of some of the issues that you're mentioning being the source of the protests that have to be looked at as well, how would you deal with issues of the student debt, financial exclusion due to students having historical debt, and also those that might still be waiting for government to finance them or who have been approved for financing, but there's a delay in the payment of those fees from NSFAS?
I mean, some of these other issues that you mentioned you've addressed, right, and in particular for students who are passing. Students who are passing who actually have met their requirements for academic progression, have broadly been supported. You've got students who are in their system who have not qualified for NSFAS because they failed twice and don't qualify for the university because some of them have failed 3 or 4 times in a year. And of course, they can't pay. So debt as well, if you unpack it, you find that there are some students who actually have been academically slack, if I can put it more politely, to qualify for all the funding mechanisms. And as I, close on this question, don't forget that debt is nothing unique to South Africa. The United States sits with, I was in a webinar last week where they are talking about debt that is in excess of $1.7 trillion US. Think about that number, $1.7 trillion US in student debt. So this is the world's wealthiest, arguably most powerful nation, but it's got that problem. So, sometimes our problems are just a fraction of what the world has to worry about. So we need to think about how you solve them, and there's no silver bullet for that.
But are there ways that you think that, you know, the students at Wits could actually be able to contribute, especially once they have graduated, to become those social citizens that actually give back to the economy and not just, you know, leave with their certificates and go to lands across the oceans?
Absolutely. In actual fact, we will continue through various engagements with fundraisers, working with some of the students' groups to support students who are willing and able to succeed. And that will not compromise on. No excellent student will be excluded on academic ground. But the failing student, I'm going to make it clear here, that if someone fails more than 3 or 4 times, then that person is blocking the chance for another person. And I'm saying this as a vice-chancellor, I will not compromise on that.
Now, one of your goals during your tenure is to actually create a Massachusetts Institute of Technology-styled digital technology hub. Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, of course, the MIT, as it is called, is a university that is located in Boston, in a place called Cambridge in America. We can't be an MIT, right?
That's why I said MIT styled.
Yeah.
That's just actually borrowing your own words. MIT styled institution of technology.
Just to be tongue-in-cheek, maybe in 30 years' time, in 100 years' time, MIT will say, like, no, we'd like to be the Wits of Boston. But anyway, the aim here, being located in Braamfontein, in the heart of basically Africa's most vibrant, Africa's wealthiest, Africa's most diversity, presents for us an opportunity in the space where you've got like in excess of 40,000 or 50,000 young people working, playing, and living there, right? So what do young people bring that Youth Barge brings? It brings energy. It brings exploration, new ideas. The Silicon Valley in the States was not triggered by men my age or women my age. It was started by young guys, Zuckerberg, coming out of college dorms. Steve Jobs in the 1970s was a 20-30-year-old man. So therefore, you know, if you actually harness the creative talent of young people, and I think with this partnership we've had at Wits with IBM, we've established a digital hub called Katlehong-born, and that hub is the, I would say, is our starting point of building digital tech, where some of the ideation that comes out of student laboratories, the RESIs, will now be tested at Katlehong, which means a place of new dawn. And therefore, hopefully in the next 10, 15 years, even beyond my tenure, that we have an equivalent of a digital tech that will spawn our own Microsoft, who knows?
Well, a Silicon Valley of sorts in Braamfontein. Well, we look forward to seeing how your tenure will unfold. We will follow you closely. And obviously, we look forward to the achievements that you plan to implement that are actually going to be for the benefit not only of the Wits students, but of the, you know, Johannesburg society in the Braamfontein area at large. That was the new Wits Vice-Chancellor, Professor Zeblon Vilakazi.